Hi everyone, welcome back. So I already 3D printed a version of this because I needed to check my 3D printer. I haven't used it in a really long time, so I just wanted to make sure it was working before I went through that whole process. And it's a good thing I did because as you can kind of see, the original, when I first 3D printed it, a lot of things were sort of like out of calibration. So the print actually ended up being super wonky. But anyway, I fixed it, and here is the print from the file that we made previously. For the most part, it works pretty nicely. We'll go through and talk about some of the issues that we have with it, and make those adjustments directly in the CAD file. But for the most part, I think it's pretty good. The most important feature being the fit and the fit and tolerance of this key and how well it fits into the potentiometer. I think it works pretty well, right? I think it's tight enough that it seems to go on there nicely, but not so sort of tight that we can't get it in there at all. So I think that's pretty good. And actually, when we put this on there, in terms of how well it sort of swung from one side to the other side, I think it was pretty good as well. The only real things that we want to, the only real functional thing that we probably have to adjust is the little flange here. I made this way too small. So if you compare this flange to that flange, you can see that it's pretty significantly different. And the version that we have now doesn't actually do anything at all. So we're gonna have to beef that up quite a bit. The rest of it is actually just cosmetic, right? The little pointer I feel like doesn't work as nice. I think we want to make that a little bit bigger as well, just so that it's a little more prominent. And then our little hedgehog also isn't quite as prominent as we want it to be. So again, most of the things are superficial or sort of cosmetic, so it should be a pretty easy fix. We'll update our CAD file and then go get into it from there. So let's go ahead and jump into our CAD file that we already have open. And so, as I said before, let's just go ahead and change some of the really basic cosmetic things real quickly. For the most part, let's update our little pointer so I can jump back into my sketch. Again, what's nice about all this stuff is I can just literally jump back in there because I updated this before so that I have my constraints here, right? If I wanted to make this bigger, let's say 5 millimeters now, advance that a little bit bigger there, maybe make this 3 millimeters. Maybe that's a little too big. I feel like that's too ginormous. Make those adjustments and make that a little bit wider. Once I've just updated those two files, finish my sketch, head back to my file, and you can see everything is literally just updated for me. I didn't have to change any of the chamfers. I didn't have to change the shell. I didn't have to change anything else. My pointer is already good to go. All right, so that's a really nice quick fix, uh, quick update. And so that looks pretty good. The other thing that I wanted to change or wanted to update is because our little hedgehog isn't as prominent as I want it to be, let's go ahead and make that thicker. I have to go back into this extrusion, double click into that, make that maybe all of one. Let's make that 1 millimeter instead, really give it a little bit more prominence, make that a little bit thicker. I'm also going to thicken up the shell in here, right? Just so that there's a little bit more sort of material because we're cutting away this hedgehog so much. I just want to add a little bit more material around this, that outside shell, so that it has a little bit more strength. So in order to do that, I'm just going to go up here to my extrude tool and extrude these surfaces. Keep in mind that I could have gone back into my history, right, and gone back and like changed the properties of the shell, but because it's already said and done, I don't really want to go back. And it's just as easy to select all these different surfaces as opposed to having to go all the way back just to extrude that one surface. So that's fine. Let's make this an extra 1.5 millimeters, just sticking that up all the way. I don't think it should interfere. I think we got plenty of space in there, to be able to give it a little bit more thickness. So we should be good to go. We should be good to go for that. I think if we want to check out the section view, section analysis, let's check out this section analysis just to see what we're working with. You can see that that's a pretty good section of here. I feel like there's a pretty good thickness of material that runs through this. Let's turn off this canvas. I don't need this canvas anymore for now. It's a pretty good thickness so that there's still enough material to keep it robust, but without it being so like, without necessarily sort of like making having to cut too much or continue to print too much, right? So that looks good. Let's go ahead and delete that and turn that section view off. Turn that section view off, and then we can continue. So the other thing that we're going to try to do is, oh yeah, the flange, right? So like I said, the main thing that in terms of functionality is really just the flange here. So we're gonna go ahead and beef that up quite significantly. And because I just eyeballed it, like you can see that I was really far off with my sort of like eyeballing. So let's go ahead and update that and sort of like make that better. I think we just need to make it a little bit taller and actually maybe just a tad wider. So let's go ahead and do that. That go back to which sketch is this? We have to go to the flange sketch, which is again why we name these things. Let's make that just a tad wider. Let's just call that 20. 20. I want to offset this a little bit more. Let's offset this a little bit more. Is that how we did it before? I think, or maybe that's fine. Maybe we don't need to offset anymore. I think actually that's a good offset. Let's leave it like that. What we do need to do though is make that taller. So that extrusion, which extrusion is that? I probably should have named it. This is the problem. I didn't name it. I didn't name that extrusion, so you can see how troublesome that is. So let's extrude that, which is what this one was. Or actually, I can just go back in, add another extrusion. This is probably not the best workflow, but I should have named it so that I know how to go back and sort of just like update that later. Update that file. Maybe it is this one. It is that one. All right, so that is that one. So let's go ahead and update that. 1 millimeter is way too small. If we look at what we're working with here, it looks like it's, I probably should grab my calipers, but again, I'm just gonna eyeball it. Let's call that 3.5 millimeters. Let's call that 3.5 millimeters. 3.5 millimeters, right? I don't know, maybe that's, that, how does that look? Maybe too much, too much, too much, maybe. Let's call it 3. Let's go back to, let's do 3. Let's call that 3 millimeters instead, and hopefully that is much better. I'm gonna add, because of, we're gonna 3D print this, and because of how thin this area is, I'm gonna add one more fillet on this corner because this is probably the part that's most likely to break. And again, because we're 3D printing, when you have this part, this really sharp angle, this is the one that probably will be most likely to break. So let's add a fillet to here and here. Probably, let's call it 0.5 millimeters. Yeah, that looks fine. Hit OK. That will make it a little bit, again, less likely to just sort of like snap off, right? Just because then it has a little bit more of a fillet to be able to distribute the forces that run through there. And I think in terms of functionality, I think that's pretty much it. I think that's all we really need to do in terms of updating our file. So in our next step here, I'll walk you through how we are going to send this to the 3D printer. Okay, so now that we are ready to 3D print, what's nice about Fusion is that it's actually really easy to take the file directly from Fusion and into your 3D slicing program. So once you have your body and everything set up properly, all you really need to do is go to File and 3D Print. Some of these options will show up for you as you're starting out for the most part, doing everything that is That's just sort of default, works just fine. And I wouldn't really recommend anything more than that. I would say, again, sort of default. The things that you want to just make sure that you double check is that the format is STL and the units, you typically want to put it in millimeters. Your CAD software typically only thinks of it in pure sort of like numbers or values. So it doesn't recognize whether or not it's inches or millimeters. So if you're working in inches, um, and this is like, 2 inches, it will still, Cura will still convert it to 2 millimeters, right? It will read it as 2 millimeters. So something to just kind of keep in mind. Something to just kind of keep in mind. So I've selected what I want to 3D print, which is my whole body, right? And I've already selected. I have Cura already set up in my computer. Once I hit OK, it will automatically export that out for me and it will open it up, which is really nice that it does that. Otherwise, you would typically have to sort of like select it, export it, transition it, and then open it up in Cura. So it just saves you that extra step. It's opening up on my other screen, so you can't see it. I'll drag it over in a second, but it should pop up in 1 second. We'll give it a quick pause. Hopefully it will load pretty soon and then we can show you what it looks like on the 3D slicer Cura. Cura is, if you don't have it already, Cura is also a free software. So you can just kind of open, or you can download that. Um, you can download that and it will be there and available for you. So anyway, here it is. This is open. Now it is in Cura for us. And as you can see, the file is good and ready to go. All right. So a couple of things, as I said before, one of the things that happened with our last file, because of our little hedgehog here, right? Because it's printing on this bottom layer, it actually didn't come out very clean. And I'm gonna print two different versions to see, because obviously the thing that's gonna be, what we're gonna be looking at is actually that top face, right? And so we want that to be nice and clean. And in order to do that, we want to make sure that's facing forward. The only reason why I printed it this way is to prevent as much sort of like support material. That way we're not printing as much stuff, right, in this sort of support material underneath here. And then because I have this big flange also sitting underneath, it would have to print a bunch of support material underneath for it to sit up as well. Um, so I'm gonna try a couple of different things and see if I can get it to work. But first thing, so what I'm going to do, let's copy it. There should be a command that lets me copy this, or maybe I can just Control C, Control V. Yep, perfect. And then I'm going to rotate around. I'm going to rotate around this axis 180 degrees. And so now it sits underneath there. Let's move it off to the side a little bit just so that it's out of the way. Let's see. It's not going to matter too much. I'm going to look at it. That'll be our two files sitting next to each other. So again, so let's look at some of the settings here. We're not going to we can use dynamic quality. I think that's nice. It probably doesn't need to be such high quality, but I want this. Let's use standard quality because I might have to print this again, right? I might have to print this again, so I think we'd rather go with speed and try to print this a little more quickly, and then we'll probably print it one last time, We need to generate support because, like I said, because this thing is floating up in the air, we definitely need support underneath this. Otherwise, it's just going to be a big old mess everywhere. And then instead of a raft, I want to print just a brim so that, again, it sort of sticks a little bit more nicely to the 3D print, to the 3D printer. So let's preview that. So previewing is nice. So a couple things, again, to keep notice of. I'm only using this brim, right? I'm only using this brim underneath so that I can sort of attach this to the bottom. We'll see how well it prints our little hedgehog here. it will be sort of like cleaner. That way we don't have to deal with as much sort of like or deal with as much of the support material underneath versus you can see here there's going to be a ton of support material. There's going to be a ton of support material that we have to print and then eventually also, why is this not also dig out, right? So the key thing is going to be kind of annoying. Hopefully we can sort of break apart and break out the sort of support material in here, and that will be it, right? Well, and then we'll see how well it fits into the actual potentiometer after that. So anyway, those are our files, those are our settings to go through. I forgot to insert a disk, so I'm gonna insert a disk and sort of save it to the file, and then I'll show you what happens on the 3D printer. All right, so we're just about done here. Well, at least for this sort of iteration. You can actually see some of the issues that we have with the print. Like I said, I wasn't sure if this was going to be the final, so I didn't bother too much, but you can see that the first layer, this sort of like brim layer, really didn't go on that well. And because it didn't really go on that well, you can see that some of the print got a little deformed, right? It's really hard to see on that in that video, but it is slightly deformed. Fortunately for us, the part that I got deformed is actually the support material, so I don't think it didn't really affect the main part very much. So again, lucky for us, I don't think that should affect us too much. Um, Again, and then now you can see some of the sort of like the support material underneath. The finish is still sort of like pretty terrible. I really don't like that finish, so we're probably not going to use that version. We'll see how well we can sort of like remove the support material from underneath here. So let's go ahead and remove it from the support material and see what we are working with. Normally, like I said, with the brim, I like working with the brim because it usually just kind of pops off. And then with the support material, let's see if we can get this to sort of just kind of pop off. If we're lucky, well, yeah, that popped off pretty nicely. Unfortunately, it also took our flange with it. I don't even, there's our flange there. And unfortunately, our flange came off with it. That's what I was sort of afraid would happen when we did that. So anyway, let's think about this. Anyway, at least the finish up here is really nice. Maybe we'll have to come back and think of some other way to add this flange later, but at least the finish on there looks really nice. Let's connect this and see how well that looks. If we press that in, right, we can sort of turn the knob, and that's what our waffle knob sort of like looks like. I guess we don't have to have the flange. It would be nice if we can sort of like get it locked in place, but I guess if we can just sort of pay attention to where that knob is, we could sort of avoid it. I'll think about it for a little bit. Maybe I'll update it, maybe I won't. That's sort of how life goes. But there we go. That's our little knob. It fits really nicely. It spins, and it fits. So almost everything that we wanted. But yeah, I think that looks pretty good for now. Next thing we gotta do is make some waffles. So actually, I wanted to give some final thoughts because I actually ended up going back and changing or updating and finishing or fixing this little flange again. It ended up not quite working the way that I had hoped that it was going to work. It actually kind of sort of broke off while I was trying to put it on there. So I actually went back and fixed the file. There's nothing to sort of like really go into detail with the CAD, so I'm not going to show that part of it. The one part that I did want to sort of emphasize, especially for a lot of people who are getting into design and maybe feel a little, feel like it's a little, difficult to get into it. Even with a project, just something to keep in mind. Like even with a project that was as basic and simple as this was, you can see how many times I've had to sort of go through and iterate. And again, that's part of the process, right? And I hope that as you guys are going through this yourselves, that you will feel more comfortable making those mistakes as you go along and um, really learning each way. When I first started this project, I actually thought in my head, I said that it was going to take me all of like 20 minutes to sort of do. And to be fair, if I did it in Rhino and I wasn't trying to make these videos and trying to sort of like work through all these things, it probably would have taken me somewhere in the range of like 45 minutes or so. But instead, it's taken me about, I don't know, 2 weeks to do all of this. But in any case, it's been a lot of fun to work on this. Now it really works. So once we sort of are able to plug this in and press this down, now it really works. Even with the flange, it sort of locks where it should lock and stops where it should stop. It's nice and personalized. And it looks good, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty proud of that. I actually thought that I might go back and make a few more adjustments, but you know what? I think at a certain point in time, you also have to know when to stop, and this is probably a pretty good time to stop. So anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed all of this so far. Look forward to a few more videos. If there's anything that you guys are interested in working on or have anything that you want to fix, please let me know. Maybe we can again collaborate and work on something together. Um, and if you want to know more, please also visit my website, littledesignlab.org. I really look forward to meeting more of you and working with more of you. So until then, have a good one. I'll see you later.